Victor Crane lowered his phone mid-sentence, a billion-dollar oil deal forgotten as his eyes locked on a sight that shattered his world. 20 gates away, a woman's laughter floated above the airport chaos. A laugh he'd recognize anywhere. Nadia. She looked radiant, more beautiful than he remembered. Her elegant sundress, a stark contrast to the luxury suits that had surrounded him in this morning's board meeting. But it wasn't her presence that made his breath catch, that made his designer watch suddenly feel like a shackle against his wrist. It was the two small children playing at her feet. A boy and a girl, no more than 2 years old, with skin the perfect blend of his fair tone and Nadia's rich umber. The boy's unmistakable Crane jawline, the girl's eyes, his mother's eyes. "Mr. Crane?" His assistant's voice crackled through the phone, still suspended in his hand. "The Saudi contract." Victor's fingers tightened around the phone as the little girl looked up, her gaze meeting his across the terminal. She smiled, his smile, and waved with innocent joy. "Mr. Crane, are you there?" The world tilted on its axis as realization struck. 2 years. It had been 2 years since he'd walked away from his infertile wife, too obsessed with securing his legacy to recognize the treasure he already had. Now that legacy stood before him, holding his ex-wife's hands, wearing light-up sneakers and matching backpacks. The price of his pride stared back at him through his own eyes. "Sir, the board is waiting." Victor Crane had built an empire on calculating odds and evaluating risks. But as he watched his unknown children bounce with excitement over an approaching plane, he realized he'd made the worst miscalculation of his life. Subscribe now to witness a story of choices that reshape lives forever, and the price we pay when we let pride blind us to life's greatest treasures. Flashback to 2 years earlier. The Houston skyline stretched before Victor Crane's penthouse office, each glittering tower a testament to his empire, but none quite as impressive as Crane Petroleum's headquarters. At 45, Victor had transformed his grandfather's modest oil business into a global powerhouse. His name graced drilling platforms from Texas to Dubai, refineries across 3 continents, and boardrooms in every major financial capital. The morning sun caught the edges of his latest acquisition contract, another independently owned oil field in West Texas. Every signature added another piece to his legacy. Every handshake expanded his influence. His corner office, with its marble floors and ancient mahogany desk, overlooked the very streets where his grandfather once struggled to secure his first loan. Personal photos were noticeably absent from his office walls. Instead, aerial shots of his largest oil fields hung like priceless artworks. The latest addition, a massive operation in Saudi Arabia, dominated the wall behind his desk. Each image represented billions in assets, thousands of employees, and countless hours of negotiation. This was Victor's world, measured in barrels, calculated in dividends, and valued in pure power. The annual oil and gas humanitarian ball seemed like any other to Victor. Champagne flutes, polite conversations about crude prices, and the usual parade of potential investors. Until he saw her. Nadia Phillips stood out in a sea of predictable faces, her deep purple gown a refreshing contrast to the room's monochrome wealth. She wasn't there to discuss oil futures or negotiate deals. As the executive director of a children's education nonprofit, Nadia commanded attention with passion rather than power. Victor watched her gracefully deflect a donor's condescending remarks about charity cases, responding instead with statistics about educational impact in underserved communities. Their eyes met across the ballroom as she finished her speech about equal opportunities in STEM education. Victor expected the usual flicker of recognition, the calculated interest he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, Nadia raised an eyebrow, a subtle challenge in her smile. "Mr. Crane," she said when he approached, "I hope you're not here to mansplain the oil industry to me. I wrote my thesis on environmental law and corporate responsibility." Their courtship defied Houston's social expectations. Instead of exclusive restaurants, Nadia took Victor to local food trucks. Rather than opera boxes, they found themselves at community theater productions where her nonprofit students performed. Victor discovered a world beyond boardrooms and balance sheets, while Nadia challenged his perspective on privilege and purpose. 3 months of late-night conversations about dreams and social responsibility turned into weekend escapes to her favorite small towns. 6 months of Victor attending every fundraiser she organized turned into him establishing a STEM scholarship fund in her name. 9 months of Nadia teaching him to see people beyond profit margins turned into a sunset proposal atop his newest office building. The wedding merged their worlds perfectly. Oil barons sat beside inner-city teachers. Wall Street investors chatted with nonprofit directors. Nadia wore her grandmother's pearls with a modern gown, tradition meeting progress in every detail. Even the cynical society columns called it a perfect match, old money embracing new values. "You've made me see success differently," Victor whispered during their first dance. Nadia smiled, squeezing his hand. "And you've helped me dream bigger." Life as newlyweds brought a harmony Victor never knew he needed. Mornings began with Nadia's laughter over coffee on their penthouse balcony. Evenings ended with long talks about their future, her head resting on his chest as they planned the family they'd build together. "I want them to have your heart," Victor would say, running his fingers through her hair, "and your drive to help others." Nadia dreamed out loud about converting the penthouse's spare office into a nursery. She painted pictures of future holidays, children's stockings hanging beside theirs, family portraits replacing the stark oil field photos in Victor's office. They picked out potential names, debated private schools versus public education, and imagined tiny feet running through their home. Their shared dream took shape in small gestures. Victor surprised Nadia by learning to cook her mother's recipes. She reorganized her nonprofit's board meetings to join him for important business dinners. They carved out Sunday afternoons for practice, babysitting her sister's kids, taking notes on parenting styles, building their vision of family life. "We'll be ready," Nadia assured him. "The perfect time will come." The questions started subtly during quarterly meetings. Old guard board members would casually mention their grandchildren, eyes fixed meaningfully on Victor. Shareholders dropped hints about succession planning and family, controlled interests between budget discussions. "The Crane name carries weight," board member Harrison Walsh reminded him after a particularly tense meeting. "But names need new generations to maintain their power. Look at the Rockefellers, the Gettys, all built on blood ties." The pressure mounted when Victor's closest competitor, James Richardson, announced his son would be taking over their West Coast operations. Suddenly, every conversation turned to legacy. Investment partners wanted assurances about long-term family commitment. Potential deals hinged on questions about future leadership. It is Father's Day, having an heir meant security. In Victor's world of billion-dollar contracts and generational wealth, it became an obsession. Each board meeting felt like a countdown, every shareholder gathering a reminder of what he lacked. "Think of the empire you've built," his CFO said one evening. "Who will protect it after you're gone? Blood, Victor. Only blood truly guards a legacy." Each month became a carefully orchestrated mission. Nadia tracked temperatures and cycles with military precision, while Victor rearranged global business meetings around optimal timing. Their intimate moments, once spontaneous and joyful, transformed into scheduled obligations marked on shared calendars. The first fertility specialist suggested patience. The second prescribed medications that left Nadia nauseated and emotional. The third recommended increasingly invasive procedures. Victor spared no expense, flying in experts from Switzerland, Japan, New York, each promising different approaches, each ending in disappointment. Nadia maintained her grace through hormone injections and endless tests. She smiled through baby showers for friends, celebrated others' announcements, and kept her tears private. But Victor noticed how she stopped planning the nursery, how baby names disappeared from their conversations. Their home filled with prescription bottles instead of baby toys. Calendar notifications marked doctor appointments rather than developmental milestones. The dreams they'd shared became medical charts and statistical probabilities. "We'll try again next month," became their mantra, each repetition holding less hope than the last. Success, once Victor's comfort, became his torment. Each business victory felt hollow without an heir to inherit it. He spent hours in his office, staring at the family tree mounted beside his degrees. Generations of Crane men, their legacy now hanging by a thread. His father's words haunted him. A man's worth is measured by what he leaves behind. The empire he'd built seemed meaningless without someone to continue the Crane dynasty. He watched competitors' children join their family businesses, while his succession plans remained empty promises to the board. Nights grew longer at the office. He buried himself in expansion plans, acquisition strategies, anything to avoid the quiet of their increasingly tense home. The gentle understanding in Nadia's eyes became unbearable. Her attempts to discuss adoption were met with stony silence. Even his charity work with Nadia's nonprofit felt pointless. What good was helping other people's children when he couldn't create his own legacy? The weight of his family name pressed down harder with each passing day. Legacy isn't just about blood, Nadia would say. But Victor had stopped listening. The Crane name opened doors to the world's most exclusive medical facilities. Private jets whisked them to appointments at Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins, each visit adding another specialist to their growing list of consultations. Victor approached fertility like a hostile takeover, demanding results, expecting success. He hired a medical coordinator to manage their appointments, scheduling treatments between board meetings and Nadia's nonprofit events. Their shared calendar became a battlefield of blood tests, hormone treatments, and procedural preparations. The fourth IVF attempt failed in a sterile room in Manhattan. The fifth ended with a miscarriage in Houston. The sixth never made it past the preliminary stages. Each failure came with its own set of charts, probabilities, and cold medical terminology that reduced their dreams to clinical data points. Dr. Morrison, their lead specialist, suggested a break. "Stress can be a significant factor," he explained, avoiding Victor's intense stare. "Perhaps if we pause treatments for a few months." "We don't have months," Victor interrupted, his voice sharp. "We need results, whatever it costs, whatever it takes." Distance crept into their marriage like frost, spreading through quiet dinners and empty conversations. Victor stopped joining Nadia for morning coffee, scheduling early meetings to avoid their once cherished ritual. His questions about her day became mechanical, his responses distracted. He moved into the guest room, claiming late work calls would disturb her rest. Their home, once warm with possibility, turned into a museum of what could have been. The unopened nursery door stood like a monument to their failure. Nadia noticed how Victor flinched when her sister visited with her newborn, how he turned away from pregnancy announcements at charity events, how his eyes hardened when board members mentioned their grandchildren. His gentle teasing disappeared, replaced by critical comments about her nonprofit work, suggesting she focused too much on other people's children. Their physical intimacy vanished outside scheduled procedures. Victor buried himself in acquisition reports, building walls of paperwork between them. When Nadia reached for his hand during dinner, he'd already be reaching for his phone. "Talk to me," she'd plead. "There's nothing to discuss," he'd reply, his voice distant as space. The quarterly board meeting felt more like an inquisition. Victor sat at the head of the mahogany table, watching his father's old friends exchange knowing glances as they discussed future planning. "Richardson's boy closed that Middle East deal," Harrison Walsh announced, his tone pointed. "Youth brings innovation. Fresh blood keeps companies competitive." Other board members nodded in agreement, their message clear. The CFO's presentation highlighted competitor companies with strong family leadership. Each slide felt like an accusation. Charts showing generational wealth transfer strategies mocked Victor's empty legacy. Questions about 10-year succession plans hung unanswered. "My sources say Peterson Oil is positioning for a hostile takeover," the legal counsel warned. They're exploiting shareholder concerns about leadership continuity without a clear succession plan. Victor's knuckles whitened around his pen. The empire he'd built, the power he'd amassed, all suddenly fragile without an heir to protect it. Each presentation, every comment reinforced what he saw as his greatest failure. "We need assurances, Victor," Walsh said after the meeting. "The Crane dynasty can't end with you." Nadia's world shrank with each passing day. Her friends, mostly young mothers now, stopped including her in playdates and birthday parties. Their attempts at comfort, "it'll happen when it's meant to," became harder to bear than silence. She threw herself into work, expanding her nonprofit's reach, but even there, reminders lurked: parent-teacher meetings, children's success stories, family engagement programs. Each moment highlighted what she couldn't have. The joy she once found in helping others dimmed under the shadow of her own loss. Her sister's invitations became less frequent, her mother's calls more cautious. Family gatherings turned into exercises in avoiding certain topics. She stopped attending baby showers, making excuses about work commitments. Her social circle dwindled to people who wouldn't ask about children or future plans. Even her home offered no comfort. The quiet halls echoed with absence. Victor's increasing coldness left her feeling like a guest in her own space. She found herself working later, avoiding the heavy silence of their penthouse. "How are you holding up?" her mother asked during their weekly calls. "I'm fine," Nadia would lie, her voice steady even as tears fell. It erupted over dinner, their untouched plates witnesses to years of buried pain. Victor had missed another appointment, choosing a board meeting over being there for Nadia's latest test results. "I can't do this alone anymore," Nadia said, her voice breaking the silence. "I need my husband, not another check for treatments." Victor's response came cold and calculated. "The board needs assurance about Crane Petroleum's future. Our personal issues can't interfere with business." "Personal issues?" Nadia's laugh held no humor. "Is that what you call our marriage now?" "A marriage needs a future," Victor replied, his words sharp as glass. "It needs a legacy." "We could adopt," Nadia suggested, "not for the first time. There are so many children who need—" "I need an heir, not charity." The moment the words left his mouth, Victor knew he'd crossed a line. Nadia stood slowly, dignity intact despite her tears. "Your father built an empire, but you've built a prison. I hope your legacy keeps you warm at night." She placed her wedding ring on the table, the soft clink echoing like a gavel. The divorce papers lay on Victor's desk like a business contract, emotions reduced to legal terms and asset divisions. His lawyer waited patiently as he stared at the signature line, Mont Blanc pen heavy in his hand. "The terms are generous," the lawyer assured. "The prenup stands plus additional compensation for—" He paused, choosing his words carefully, "medical inconveniences." Victor thought of their last fertility appointment. Dr. Morrison's carefully practiced sympathy, Nadia's quiet strength, his own crushing disappointment. Each failed attempt had carved away another piece of their love until only obligation remained. The board's words echoed in his mind. Crane Petroleum needs stability. Family legacy ensures shareholder confidence. His father's portrait seemed to watch from the wall, judging his choices as always. He signed without flourish, authority in every stroke. The lawyer gathered the papers efficiently, promises of quick processing and absolute discretion falling on deaf ears. Alone in his office, Victor pulled out a small black box, the family ring meant for his firstborn. 5 generations of Crane men had passed it down. Now it would stay locked away, like his dreams of family. Society columns called it a strategic union. Victoria Blake, 28, daughter of Texas oil royalty, represented everything the board wanted. Her family connections promised new business opportunities. Her age suggested fertility. Her polished presence at corporate events met every expectation of a Crane wife. The wedding was a business merger dressed in white lace. Board members nodded approvingly from the front rows. Shareholders exchanged satisfied looks during the reception. Victoria's father spoke of joining dynasties. In his toast, while futures traders discussed potential market impacts over champagne. No one mentioned Nadia. The previous Mrs. Crane disappeared from Houston's social circle like morning mist, her name carefully avoided in polite conversation. Victor buried himself in work, treating his new marriage like another successful acquisition. Victoria played her role perfectly, charming investors, hosting corporate events, presenting the image of devoted wife. But their penthouse felt like a hotel suite, their interactions choreographed for public consumption. At night, Victor would stand at his office window, watching the city lights blur. The ring box in his desk drawer remained locked, holding not just family heritage, but memories of real love. The headline Crane dynasty dissolves. Oil magnate seeks new beginnings stared at Nadia from her phone screen. She deleted the news alert, along with dozens of messages from concerned society friends. Their penthouse, once a symbol of shared dreams, now felt like a museum of broken promises. Movers worked efficiently, packing her life into labeled boxes. Her nonprofit office already sat empty. Resignation submitted before Victor's PAR team could spin the story. Houston, her home for the past 6 years, had transformed overnight into a city of whispers and sideways glances. Each room held memories she couldn't pack away. The kitchen where they'd attempted her mother's recipes. The living room where they'd planned vacations and futures. The untouched nursery still waiting for dreams that never arrived. In her closet, she found his old Harvard sweatshirt, forgotten behind designer dresses. The familiar scent triggered tears she'd held back all week, not for the lost wealth or status, but for the man who'd once brought her coffee in bed, who'd loved her before legacy became his obsession. Julie's Victorian home in New Orleans' Garden District offered sanctuary from Houston's gossip. Nadia's childhood bedroom remained unchanged. Debate team trophies and law school acceptance letters still lined the walls, reminders of who she was before becoming Mrs. Crane. "This is still your home," Julie said, helping Nadia unpack the few boxes she'd brought. The rest of her Houston life sat in climate, controlled storage too heavy with memories to face yet. Neighbors welcomed her with quiet dignity, asking no questions when she joined their morning walks. The familiar creaks of her mother's house, the scent of gardenias from the courtyard, the distant jazz from French Quarter streets. Everything felt like a gentle embrace. Her mother maintained routine with graceful purpose. Morning coffee on the veranda, evening meals at the formal dining table, weekend farmers' market visits. Simple rhythms that helped Nadia find her footing again. "You're not starting over," Julie would say, watching Nadia stare at old family photos. "You're remembering who you've always been." The morning sickness hit during a French Quarter art festival. Nadia blamed street food, stress, anything but the possibility that haunted her. 3 years of negative tests had taught her not to hope. Yet here she was, sitting on her bathroom floor, staring at 2 pink lines on a test she'd bought in a moment of irrational optimism. She took 5 more tests over 3 days. Each positive result felt like a twist of fate's knife. The timing seemed cruel, just weeks after signing divorce papers, after Victor had already announced his engagement to Victoria. The local clinic confirmed what she already knew. Twins, the doctor announced, pointing to the ultrasound screen. Both looking healthy, the steady rhythm of 2 heartbeats filled the room, drowning out the chaos in Nadia's mind. Twins. The family she'd prayed for, arriving after Victor had decided she couldn't give him children. The irony might have made her laugh if it didn't hurt so much. Walking home through Jackson Square, her hand rested on her still flat stomach. 2 lives growing inside her, unplanned, unexpected, yet somehow right. The business section of the Houston Chronicle sat open on Julie's kitchen table. Victor and Victoria's wedding announcement in crisp black and white. Nadia's hand drifted to her stomach as she read the carefully crafted PAR quotes about new beginnings and looking to the future. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from her lawyer. The settlement terms included stipulations about future claims. These babies would entitle her to more, her lawyer would argue. The Crane name alone meant millions in potential support. But money wasn't what stopped her from dialing Victor's number. Pride wasn't what made her decline media inquiries. Looking at the wedding photo, seeing the triumph in Victor's eyes, she understood he'd made his choice based on who he thought she was. He didn't deserve to know who she really turned out to be. "These babies are mine," she told her reflection that night. "My miracle, my family." The choice felt right, like finally setting down a heavy burden. She'd protect them from the weight of the Crane legacy, from the pressure that had destroyed their parents' love. Julie took the news with quiet grace, waiting until Nadia finished speaking before pulling her daughter into a fierce embrace. "Those babies," she whispered, "are coming home to generations of strong women. They don't need his name or his money." The following days revealed Julie's strength. She rearranged her retirement plans without complaint, converted her art studio into a nursery, and fended off curious neighbors with practiced charm. Her morning routine now included prenatal vitamins alongside coffee, her evening prayers filled with dreams for her grandchildren. At night, when fear crept in, Julie would sit beside Nadia's bed like she had during childhood storms. "You come from a line of women who raised children on their own terms." She'd remind her, "Your grandmother ran a business with a baby on her hip. I put myself through nursing school as a single mother." Each morning, Julie left fresh flowers by Nadia's bedside, gardenias, her daughter's favorite. For morning sickness, she'd say, but they both knew the blooms meant more. Beauty growing from unexpected circumstances, strength blooming in difficult soil. Carrying twins while rebuilding a life tested every ounce of Nadia's strength. Morning sickness lasted all day, forcing her to plan meetings around waves of nausea. Her doctor labeled it a high-risk pregnancy, adding anxiety to her daily routine of prenatal vitamins and saltine crackers. Her body, already weary from years of fertility treatments, struggled with the double demands. Simple tasks became marathons. Stairs left her breathless, grocery shopping required recovery time. Sleep proved elusive as her growing belly made every position uncomfortable. The local clinic's waiting room brought fresh challenges. Other mothers chatted about supportive partners and baby showers, while Nadia sat quietly, wedding ring long gone. Each appointment brought new concerns. Blood pressure readings, glucose levels, protein markers. Blood pressure readings, glucose levels, protein markers. But amid the discomfort and worry, moments of pure joy emerged. The first flutter of movement during her morning tea, watching her ultrasound screen as one twin seemed to wave, finding both babies' heartbeats on her home monitor. Julie tracked every development in a leather-bound journal, creating a record of love rather than medical data. Life often presents us with challenging choices, moments when keeping silent feels safer than speaking truth. Nadia faced such a decision, carrying precious lives while their father celebrated a new marriage, planning his own future without knowing his greatest dream had already come true. We've all experienced crossroads where truth and silence wage war in our hearts. That moment when news could change everything, but fear and hurt hold our voices hostage. What would you do in Nadia's shoes? Would you reach out to someone who hurt you if you held life? Changing news? How do we balance protecting our peace with sharing truth that others might deserve to know? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone facing a similar choice right now. Like this video, if you've ever had to choose between speaking up and moving forward in silence. Remember to subscribe for more real-life stories that challenge us to think deeper about the choices we make and the courage it takes to make them. Now let's return to Nadia's journey as she builds a new life for herself and her unborn children. Pregnancy gave Nadia's reinvention a deadline. She channeled her nonprofit experience into freelance grant writing, building a client base from her mother's sunroom. Her business suits transformed into flowing dresses that embraced her changing body. Society events and board meetings gave way to prenatal yoga and local art classes. Her Houston polish softened into New Orleans grace. She learned to move at the city's pace, letting go of corporate schedules and shareholder expectations. The woman who once commanded charity galas now found joy in neighborhood market conversations and streetcar rides through the Garden District. She painted the nursery herself, replacing memories of Houston's untouched room with fresh dreams. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming another piece of herself. The walls bloomed with hand-drawn flowers and dancing stars, a world away from the Crane dynasty's rigid traditions. Her mother watched the change with knowing eyes. "You're glowing," Julie would say, but they both knew it wasn't just pregnancy. This was metamorphosis, the corporate wife and society hostess, becoming something entirely her own. "Who am I now?" Nadia asked her reflection one morning. A growing belly provided the answer: a mother. Rain drummed against the hospital windows as Nadia's labor intensified. 26 hours of contractions tested every ounce of strength she had left. Julie never left her side, whispering encouragement through each wave of pain. "I see the first baby," the doctor announced. "One more push." At 3:47 a.m., Nala arrived with a strong cry, her brother George following 2 minutes later. The room filled with their powerful newborn voices, a duet of life and possibility. Despite the exhaustion, Nadia's focus never wavered. She counted fingers and toes, memorized their tiny faces, marveled at how George had her nose while Nala's eyes held hints of a past she'd have to explain someday. The twins shared her warm brown skin tone, but certain features whispered their father's contribution. Not that it mattered, in her arms. They were purely themselves, untouched by legacy or obligation. "They're perfect," Julie whispered, tears flowing freely as she cradled George. "Look what you did, my strong girl." Nadia gazed at her children, heart expanding with fierce love. "We're complete," she murmured, holding Nala close. "Just as we are." The early weeks blurred into a symphony of midnight feedings and newborn needs. Nadia mastered the art of nursing 2 babies, her body somehow knowing which cry belonged to which twin. Julie kept the household running, preparing meals and fielding visitors while Nadia navigated her new role. Nala and George developed distinct personalities from the start. Nala approached the world with curious eyes, always alert, taking everything in. George proved more cautious, calming only when his sister was near. Their connection fascinated Nadia, how they seemed to communicate without words, comfort each other with just a touch. Sleep became a precious commodity. Nadia learned to doze while feeding, to function on coffee and pure determination. Her world narrowed to the nursery's 4 walls, yet somehow felt larger than ever before. Each small victory felt monumental. The first time she managed to shower while both babies napped, successfully taking them for a walk around the block, getting them to sleep simultaneously. Julie documented everything in photos, creating memories where others might have seen exhaustion. "You're a natural," her mother observed one evening. "No," Nadia smiled, watching her twins sleep. "I'm just theirs." Life found its rhythm in small moments. Morning cuddles in Julie's garden, where Nala reached for flowers while George watched butterflies. Afternoon walks in their double stroller through the French Quarter, where street musicians played jazz lullabies for the twins. Evening stories on the veranda, crickets providing background music to Nadia's voice. Their home transformed with each passing month. The formal dining room became a play area, antique rugs giving way to soft mats. Julie's expensive vases disappeared, replaced by bottles and bright toys. Baby gates appeared at every staircase, turning the Victorian mansion into a fortress of love and safety. Nadia discovered strength in routine, morning yoga while the twins napped, work during their afternoon sleep, family dinner once the sun set. She learned to measure success differently, in clean diapers and happy giggles, in peaceful naps and successful feedings. Local mothers became friends, offering support without asking about the past. Neighbors dropped off hand-me-downs and home-cooked meals. The community embraced them, creating a circle of care around the little family. "This is home," Nadia realized one evening, watching her babies play under the Louisiana sunset. Between feedings and nap times, Nadia discovered a new passion. Her experience with nonprofit grant writing evolved into a consulting business, helping small charities navigate funding opportunities. Her laptop became command central, balanced on the nursery rocking chair while the twins slept. Word spread through New Orleans' nonprofit community. Organizations appreciated her ability to translate their missions into compelling proposals. Her past connections brought clients from across the country, technology allowing her to work from home while staying close to her babies. She converted the sunroom into an office, installing a play area where the twins could safely explore while she worked. Video calls often included surprise appearances from tiny hands and bright smiles, but clients found it endearing rather than unprofessional. The business grew organically, much like her children. Each successful grant brought new referrals. Soon she hired a virtual assistant to handle administrative tasks, freeing more time for both work and family. "You've created something beautiful," Julie observed, watching Nadia juggle a client call while George played with her hair and Nala babbled at the screen. "We all did," Nadia replied, her success measured in both business growth and baby giggles. Each milestone arrived with its own magic. Nala crawled first, chasing after a rolling ball while George watched intently before following his sister's lead days later. Their first words came within hours of each other. Nala's mama during breakfast, George's at bedtime, as if they'd planned it. Their first steps turned the house into an adventure playground. Nala took off fearlessly, while George preferred holding onto furniture, both exploring their world in their own way. Julie captured every moment on camera, creating albums filled with twin victories. Nadia treasured their differences as much as their similarities. Nala gravitated toward music, swaying to street jazz from their walks. George showed early artistic interest, creating masterpieces with finger paints and endless patience. Together, they invented their own twin language, sharing secrets in babbles only they understood. Their second birthday celebration in the garden marked how far they'd come. Neighborhood friends gathered around a homemade cake, singing while the twins clapped in perfect sync. Watching them blow out candles together, Nadia felt their family's completeness. Headlines told the story in business terms. Crane-Blake Union shows signs of strain. Society columns hinted at trouble through carefully worded blind items. The Houston elite whispered about Victor and Victoria's separate appearances at major functions. Their marriage, engineered for perfection, cracked under pressure. Victoria's fertility treatments remained unsuccessful, each failure adding tension to their calculated partnership. Board meetings became uncomfortable as succession questions went unanswered. Victor buried himself in acquisitions, expanding his empire while his home life contracted. Victoria threw herself into charity events, their paths crossing only at required corporate functions. Their penthouse, designed for family life, remained cold and unused. Photographers caught their strained expressions at energy sector galas. Victoria's father made veiled comments about expectations during shareholder meetings. The same board members who championed their union now exchanged concerned glances over quarterly reports. Their third wedding anniversary passed without celebration. Victor in Dubai for business, Victoria at a spa retreat in Switzerland. The distance between them grew with each private jet flight, each separate social engagement. The legacy Victor sacrificed everything for seemed further away than ever, haunting him in empty halls and quiet dinners. Terminal C of Houston International Airport buzzed with typical Monday morning energy. Business travelers rushed past families heading for vacations, rolling suitcases creating a percussion of urgency against polished floors. Victor stood by the Emirates Airlines first class check-in, absently nodding as his assistant reviewed his Dubai itinerary. His custom suit and commanding presence drew the usual mix of recognition and deference from airport staff. The scene shifted when a child's laugh cut through the terminal's white noise. Victor's head turned automatically, drawn to the sound like a tuning fork to its perfect pitch. Near gate 30, Two toddlers played an impromptu game of tag, their mother keeping watchful eyes on their orbit. Time slowed. The airport's constant motion blurred into background static. All Victor could see was the woman's profile, achingly familiar despite 2 years' distance. Nadia looked different, her hair longer, her smile easier, her movements graceful with maternal purpose. His phone slipped from suddenly numb fingers, clattering against the floor. The sound seemed to echo across worlds, his carefully constructed present colliding with an unexpected past. Victor's mind raced through calculations he couldn't control. The twins looked about 2 years old, 2 years since the divorce. 2 years since he'd walked away believing Nadia couldn't give him children. 2 years of building a new life on a foundation of assumptions that now crumbled beneath his feet. His chest tightened as memories flooded back. The fertility specialist's reports, the cold precision of their divorce. His rushed marriage to Victoria, all decisions made with ruthless business logic, now revealed as catastrophic personal failures. The children's laughter echoed in his ears, each note a reminder of what he'd thrown away. Their movements held the natural grace of their mother, but their features. He saw himself in every angle, every gesture. His empire, built on the ability to analyze risks and seize opportunities, suddenly felt hollow. All the wealth he'd accumulated, the power he'd consolidated, meant nothing compared to the treasure he'd abandoned without knowing. The board meetings, Victoria's silent treatments, the empty halls of their showcase home. Everything shifted perspective in this fluorescent, lit moment of truth. Each detail struck Victor like physical blows. George's jaw held the distinctive Crane family line, the same angle photographers captured in oil industry magazines. Nala's eyes carried his mother's distinctive shape, a genetic signature passed down through generations. Their skin tone blended his fairness with Nadia's rich complexion perfectly, creating a shade that spoke of both parents. Even their movements echoed his childhood photos. George's careful observation, Nala's natural leadership as she guided her brother through their game. The way George tilted his head while thinking mirrored Victor's own habit during negotiations. Nala's determined expression matched the look he saw in every mirror before closing major deals. Their height, their build, the way they carried themselves, nature's undeniable signature on every feature. A group of travelers passed between them, and Victor caught a glimpse of the twins from a new angle. George's profile was startlingly familiar. The same nose that graced 3 generations of Crane men. Nala's quick smile flashed his mother's dimples, a trait he'd inherited himself. Doubt was impossible. These children were undeniably his. Nadia spotted Victor the moment he entered her peripheral vision. Maternal instinct sharpened her awareness, her body tensing like a lioness sensing danger near her cubs. Without drawing attention, she shifted position, placing herself between Victor and the twins. Her hands, steady through countless business presentations and charity galas, trembled slightly as she gathered the children's scattered toys. 2 years of carefully constructed peace, threatened to shatter in this chance airport encounter. "Nala, George," she called softly, her voice carrying just far enough to reach them. "Time to pack up, loves." The twins responded to her tone instantly, reading the subtle urgency in their mother's call. Her mind raced through options. Their flight wouldn't board for another hour. The terminal offered limited escape routes. Every exit meant passing closer to Victor, whose shocked stare burned into her back. She'd prepared for this possibility, rehearsed it in quiet moments, but theory crumbled in the face of reality. Her arms wrapped protectively around the twins as they ran to her, their small bodies warm and real against her racing heart. "Nadia." Victor's voice carried across the terminal, years of command giving it a power that made nearby travelers turn. He stepped forward, each movement deliberate despite his internal chaos. "Not here," Nadia responded, her voice low but firm. She gathered the twins closer, feeling their curiosity at this stranger who commanded their mother's attention. "There." Victor's voice cracked. How old are they? Mama, who's that man? Nala asked, her clear voice carrying the innocent curiosity of childhood. George pressed closer to his sister, watching with their father's calculating gaze. 2 years, 3 months, Nadia answered Victor's question, ignoring his flinch at the mathematical implications. And this isn't the place for this conversation. Victor took another step forward, his eyes fixed on the children. You didn't tell me. All this time. You made your choice, Nadia cut him off, steel in her voice. You chose your legacy over our marriage. Well, here's your legacy, Victor. Happy, healthy, and completely unaware of the Crane family burden. The twins looked between the adults, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. George tugged at his mother's sleeve, while Nala stood protective beside him. Is everything all right here, ma'am? An airport security officer approached, drawn by the mounting tension. His hand rested casually on his radio, eyes scanning the situation with professional concern. This is a private matter, Victor stated, his CO authority reflexively surfacing. I didn't ask you, sir, the officer replied evenly. Ma'am? Nadia straightened, years of boardroom experience evident in her composure. My children and I were just heading to our gate. 2 more security officers appeared, positioning themselves strategically. The small crowd that had gathered began dispersing under their watchful eyes. We can escort you, the first officer offered, noting how the twins pressed against their mother's legs. Wait, Victor pleaded, his voice losing its command tone. Nadia, please, just 5 minutes. The officers tensed at his step forward, but Nadia raised her hand. Not now, Victor. Not in front of them. She glanced meaningfully at the twins, who watched the scene with growing uncertainty. Let us escort you to your gate, the officer repeated firmly. As security guided them away, Victor stood frozen, watching his unknown children disappear into the terminal crowd. Sometimes, life presents us with moments that shake our foundations. Victor Crane built an empire on control and careful planning, yet here he stands, discovering his greatest assumptions were wrong. His children, the legacy he desperately wanted, had been living and growing without him, all because of choices made in pride and haste. What would you do in Victor's position, standing in that airport terminal, watching your unknown children disappear into the crowd? How do you begin to make right a wrong that's cost you 2 years of precious moments? Take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you respect the boundaries of the parent who's been there since day one, or fight to be part of your children's lives? Sometimes the hardest questions have no clear answers. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear that our choices today shape our tomorrow. Now, let's see how Victor handles the truth unfolding before him. Victor's private investigator delivered a leather portfolio thick with details within 24 hours. Photos of the twins at local parks, copies of birth certificates, medical records, a paper trail of the life he'd missed. In his penthouse office, Victor spread the documents across his desk. Their birth date confirmed his calculations, conceived just before the divorce. Both babies had spent 2 weeks in NICU, arriving slightly early but fighting strong. Nadia had handled all medical bills herself, never touching the settlement money. New Orleans adoption records showed Julie had legally co-signed as guardian, ensuring the twins' security. Preschool applications listed no father. Magazine clippings revealed Nadia's successful consulting business, built while raising their children alone. His hands shook as he studied recent photos. George's first steps captured in a garden. Nala's birthday party at a local cafe. Holiday moments, everyday scenes, a family complete without him. The final photo showed the twins sleeping, hands clasped even in dreams. On the back, in Julie's handwriting, Nala and George, 2 years old, 2 pieces of a perfect whole. Dr. Morrison's office felt smaller than Victor remembered. The fertility specialist squirmed under his former patient's intense stare as reports from 2 years ago lay scattered between them. Explain this to me again, Victor commanded, his voice dangerously quiet. The initial tests. There was an oversight. Dr. Morrison dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. The hormonal imbalance we diagnosed. It was temporary. Most likely stress-induced. You told me she couldn't conceive. Each word fell like a gavel. There was pressure. Certain parties suggested definitive answers would be beneficial. The doctor's eyes darted toward the door. Victor's fist crashed against the desk. Who? Your father's influence is considerable. The board's expectations. Your assistant Sarah made it clear what answers were needed. The revelation hit Victor like physical pain. His own father, Sarah, people he'd trusted, had orchestrated this deception. Every decision, every cruel moment of his divorce had been built on carefully constructed lies. Those children, Victor's voice cracked. My children spent 2 weeks in ICU while I celebrated an engagement. Twins. Victoria's champagne glass shattered against the penthouse wall. You have twins with that woman? Victor stood by the window, his reflection overlaid on Houston's skyline. The investigators' photos lay scattered across their glass dining table, evidence of a life that existed parallel to their carefully crafted marriage. The timing, Victoria's laugh, held no humor. All those fertility treatments I endured while your ex-wife was already carrying your children. Did you know? Was this some elaborate game? I just found out today. Today? At the airport? Victoria sank into a chair, designer dress crumpling. That's where you disappeared to instead of boarding the Dubai flight. Not a business emergency after all. Her fingers traced a photo of the twins. They looked like you. God, they look exactly like you. She pulled off her wedding ring, the diamond catching evening light. All this time, I was trying to give you an heir you already had. Victoria. No, she stood, gathering her composure like armor. You wanted a legacy, Victor. Congratulations. You have one. Just not with me. This complicates matters significantly. Harrison Walsh paced Victor's office, his decades of board service evident in his frustrated gestures. 2 legitimate heirs, unknown until now. The shareholders will have questions. Other board members nodded gravely. The emergency meeting had stretched into its 3rd hour, legal teams presenting scenario after scenario. The press will have a field day, the PR director warned. Oil magnate discovers secret twins. It's a media circus waiting to happen. Perhaps we could position this positively, someone suggested. The return of the Crane heirs, a family reunited. Victor barely heard them. His focus remained on the family photos spread across his desk, evidence of a life unlived, moments lost to boardroom ambitions and family pressure. We need to consider succession planning, Walsh continued. These children have a legal claim to. Enough. Victor's voice cut through the chatter. My children aren't corporate assets to be managed. They're not merger complications or PR opportunities. The room fell silent. Never had they heard this tone from Victor Crane, not the calculated CEO voice, but something rawer, more human. You need to claim them, Victor's father declared, pacing the study of his River Oaks mansion. The Crane name carries weight. Those children are our blood. Our blood? Victor turned from the window. The same blood you tried to deny when you helped falsify those medical reports. The elder Crane faltered mid-step. I did what was necessary. The board needed stability, not a prolonged family drama. We needed to ensure. You orchestrated the destruction of my marriage. Had a doctor lie to my face. All for what? Corporate stability. For legacy. His father's fist struck the desk. Everything I've done, everything was to protect the Crane dynasty. And now, by some miracle, you have not 1 but 2 heirs. Pure Crane blood despite our intervention. They're not your legacy to claim. Victor's voice carried years of suppressed defiance. Nadia raised them without our name, our money, our manipulation. They're happy, healthy, and free from everything I've spent 2 years realizing doesn't matter. His father's face hardened. You're making a mistake. No, Victor replied. I'm finally fixing one. Through his investigator's photos, Victor glimpsed the life he'd lost. Nadia's New Orleans home bloomed with the warmth their house and penthouse never had. Toys scattered across polished floors, children's artwork taped to antique walls, a kitchen that looked lived in and loved. Her consulting business had flourished, specialized in helping small nonprofits secure funding. She'd turned the formal dining room into a playroom, the garden into an adventure space. Julie's presence was evident everywhere, in family photos, shared meals, daily moments. The twins attended a progressive preschool 3 mornings a week, afternoons filled with music classes, playground visits, story times at the local library. Their world brimmed with art, culture, and unconditional love. Nadia had built something precious from the ashes of their marriage. Her social media showed a woman who'd found her stride, confident in mothers' groups, leading community projects, creating a life rich in meaning rather than money. Recent photos captured her reading to the twins on their veranda, her face serene in the soft Louisiana light. She'd done more than survive. She'd done more than survive. She'd created a world where their children could thrive, free from the weight of expectations. The investigators' photos told a story of joyful innocence. Nala and George's world remained untouched by Crane family politics or corporate legacies. Their days filled with simple pleasures, chasing butterflies in Julie's garden, dancing to street musicians, creating finger paint masterpieces. They attended a local preschool where they were just Nala and George, not Crane heirs. Their friends included the baker's son, the librarian's daughter. Children who played together without knowing or caring about net worth or social status. In every photo, their happiness radiated. George helping Julie water her plants, Nala leading neighborhood kids in makeshift parades. They shared an unshakable bond, always within arm's reach of each other, creating their own private language of twin gestures and looks. Their artwork covered Nadia's fridge, stick figure family drawings showing 3 people, Mama, Nala, and George. No space left empty for missing fathers or complicated pasts. Their world was complete as it was. They fell asleep to stories of adventure and possibility, not tales of family obligation or corporate responsibility. Their dreams remained unshadowed by the burden of the Crane name. The Garden District mansion stood bathed in morning light, its weathered grace a far cry from Houston's sleek towers. Victor paused at the wrought iron gate, watching Nala and George play in the front garden under Julie's watchful eye. His rental car stood out on the quiet street, too new, too corporate among the neighborhood's gentle decay. He'd dismissed his driver, his security detail, every trapping of the Crane empire. This moment demanded humility. Through the gate, he could hear the twins' laughter mixing with birdsong and distant jazz. George balanced on the garden wall while Nala arranged flowers in patterns. Their movements held such natural joy, such freedom from the weight he'd carried his whole life. Taking a deep breath, Victor pushed open the gate. The hinges creaked, announcing his presence. Julie spotted him first, her posture stiffening as she moved toward the children. But Nadia's voice cut through the morning air from the veranda. I wondered when you'd come. She descended the steps slowly, each movement deliberate. Gone was the society wife who'd graced Houston galas. This Nadia carried herself with earned confidence, maternal steel in her spine. They're beautiful, Victor managed, his voice rough with emotion. They are, Nadia positioned herself between Victor and the twins. They're also happy, loved, and free from the burden that destroyed our marriage. I know about the medical reports, Victor stepped forward, about my father's interference, Sarah's manipulation. Stop. Nadia's word cut like a blade. Those lies hurt me once, but they gave me something precious. Freedom to raise our children away from the Crane dynasty's poison. Inside, little ones, Julie called, her nurse's instincts reading the tension in the air. time for your morning snack." She guided the twins toward the house, shielding them from the unfolding scene. At the doorway, she turned to Victor. "You may have discovered the truth, but you haven't earned the right to disrupt the peace. 2 years, Mr. Crane. 2 years of birthdays, nightmares, first steps. Where were you?" "I didn't know," Victor started. "No," Julie's voice held decades of maternal protection. "You didn't ask. You didn't fight. You accepted a convenient lie because it fit your plans. My daughter rebuilt her life from the ashes of your ambition. Those children are thriving because she chose their happiness over your name." She straightened, every inch the family matriarch. "Think carefully about your next move." "Mama, who's that man?" Nala called from the doorway, evading Julie's gentle guidance. George peeked around his sister, their twin curiosity overwhelming caution. "Why does he look like my drawing?" George asked, pointing to the family portrait he'd created in preschool, the one where he'd given himself the same jaw, the same bearing that now stood before them. "Is he your friend, Mama?" Nala stepped onto the veranda, her fearless nature shining through. "He looks sad. Does he need a hug? You always say hugs make sad better." Victor stood frozen, each innocent question striking deeper than any boardroom negotiation, the simple wisdom of children cutting through years of adult complexity. "Sometimes," Nadia answered carefully. "Grown-ups need time to figure things out before they can explain them to clever children." "You walked away." Nadia's voice trembled once the twins were inside. "You didn't just sign divorce papers. You erased me, replaced me within months. All because I supposedly couldn't give you what you wanted." "I was wrong," Victor's voice cracked. "So terribly wrong." "Wrong," Nadia laughed without humor. "I spent 2 weeks in the hospital with premature twins while you celebrated your engagement. I read about your perfect new wife while recovering from an emergency C-section. I watched our children fight for life in the ICU while Houston society praised your fresh start. If I had known." "You would have what? Stayed out of duty? Claimed them for your precious legacy? These children aren't chess pieces in your corporate game, Victor. They're not assets to be acquired." "Dr. Morrison confessed everything." Victor pulled out the signed affidavit. "My father orchestrated it. Sarah helped execute the plan. They pressured him to falsify results, to tell us what they wanted us to hear." Nadia took the document, her hand steady despite the storm of emotions crossing her face. "Your father never thought I was good enough, but Sarah, I trusted her. They wanted an ending that served the Crane legacy, a clean break that would push me toward a more suitable match." His voice filled with self-loathing, and I fell for it. Accepted their lies because they matched my fears. All those treatments, the appointments, the hope and heartbreak. It was all manufactured by people who claimed to care about our best interests. Victor's fists clenched. They stole years we can never get back. Through the window, Victor watched the twins share an apple, George carefully dividing it while Nala supervised. Their natural grace, their innate connection, everything he dreamed of in an heir, multiplied by 2. Yet they were so much more than legacy vessels. They were innocent souls who'd grown strong without the weight of his name, who loved freely, laughed easily, lived fully, everything he'd forgotten how to do in his pursuit of empire building. "I spent my life chasing legacy," he whispered, "trying to prove myself worthy of the Crane name. But they're already more than I ever was. They're pure, untainted by our world of mergers and acquisitions." "They're children, Victor," Nadia said softly, "not corporate assets." "I see that now," his voice caught. "You gave them the greatest gift, freedom from everything I thought mattered." Back in his hotel room, Victor stared at himself in the mirror, seeing beyond the polished exterior of Houston's oil magnate. The mantle of Crane family expectations suddenly felt like a prison he'd built around himself, brick by brick. His phone buzzed constantly, board members demanding answers, Victoria's lawyers outlining divorce terms, his father's increasingly angry messages. The empire he'd sacrificed everything for now seemed hollow compared to the sound of his children's laughter. He pulled out a photo from his wallet. Him at their age, stiff in a tiny suit, already being molded into a successor. What freedom had he lost in becoming his father's perfect heir? What joy had been stripped away in pursuit of legacy? George and Nala played without that burden, loved without condition, lived without the constant pressure of expectation. They had something he'd never known. Childhood untainted by dynasty. Victor's phone lit up with Victoria's call. Her carefully controlled voice carried waves of anger through the line. The board called. They want to announce the twins' existence, position it as a triumph for the Crane dynasty. Is that what you want? No, Victor replied quietly. Then what do you want, Victor? Because right now, you're destroying everything we built. Our marriage, your reputation, shareholder confidence, all hanging by a thread. She paused, her breath sharp across the connection. Here's your choice. Come home. We'll manage this peer crisis, maintain control of the narrative. I'll even accept them as your heirs, raise them properly in Houston society. Or lose everything. The board will question your judgment. My father's support will vanish. The media will paint you as an absent father who abandoned his children. Choose carefully. Harrison Walsh's voice filled Victor's hotel room through the speakerphone, joined by a chorus of board members on the emergency call. The shareholders need reassurance. The shareholders need reassurance. These children represent the future of Crane Petroleum. The PR team has drafted announcements. Another voice chimed in. We'll position this as a heartwarming reunion story. The prodigal heirs returning to their rightful place. We've already contacted top private schools in Houston, Walsh continued. The timing works perfectly. They can start fresh next semester. The press will love it. The Crane legacy secured twice over, someone added. Think of the positive coverage. Victor watched the New Orleans sunset through his window, remembering his children's uninhibited play in Julie's garden. The board's voices faded against the memory of their laughter. Victor, we need your decision. Nadia sat in her home office after the twins' bedtime, surrounded by evidence of the life she'd built. Client contracts, preschool artwork, family photos, each piece representing a choice made, a victory won. She opened her laptop, facing the email from Victor's lawyers. They offered everything, private schools, trust funds, a suitable Houston residence, all the trappings of the Crane name wrapped in legal terminology. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she thought of her children sleeping upstairs, of George's gentle soul that would be crushed by boardroom expectations, of Nala's free spirit that would wither under society's rules. She thought of the woman she'd become, stronger, more resilient, built on her own terms. Of the mother she was, protecting her children's right to simply be children. Her response was two words: no thanks. Through his investigator's photos, Victor studied his children's daily life. Nala, leading a parade of neighborhood kids down sun-dappled streets. George, sharing his lunch with a stray cat in their garden. Both twins covered in paint after an art class, their smiles unrehearsed and brilliant. More images showed their world. Impromptu dance parties in the kitchen with Julie. Story time with Nadia, both children tucked against her sides. Birthday celebrations with local families. No corporate logos or press coverage in sight. Their faces showed no trace of the pressure he'd grown up with. No rigid posture from etiquette lessons. No practiced smiles for shareholders. Just pure, unfiltered joy. A video clip captured George comforting Nala after a fall, their twin bond evident in wordless understanding. This was childhood, as it should be. Safe, loved, free. Victor stood at his hotel window, watching New Orleans come alive at dusk. In one hand, he held the board's contract, their plan to fold the twins into the Crane dynasty. In the other, A crayon drawing George had dropped in the garden. 3 stick figures surrounded by flowers and love hearts. His father's words echoed, "Legacy is everything." But looking at his son's artwork, Victor understood he already had a legacy. One built on love rather than obligation, joy rather than duty. Choice crystallized with sudden clarity. His children didn't need private jets or trust funds. They needed the freedom to draw with crayons, to chase butterflies, to become whoever they chose to be. With steady hands, he picked up his phone to call the board. For the first time in his life, Victor Crane chose love over legacy. In the soft morning light of his hotel room, Victor drafted 2 letters. The first to the board, declining their succession plan and stepping down as CO. The second to his father, refusing to perpetuate the cycle of pressure and expectation. His phone buzzed with messages about falling stock prices and shareholder concerns. But for the first time, the numbers held no power over him. Real wealth, he realized, couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or barrel prices. Real wealth was in George's careful way of sharing snacks with his sister, in Nala's fearless questions about the world, in their unshakable bond that no corporate merger could match. True legacy wasn't in oil fields or offshore accounts. It lived in crayon drawings and twin laughter, in the courage to choose love over empire, in letting his children write their own stories. The Garden District morning bloomed with possibility as Victor sat on Nadia's veranda, watching the twins play. This time, he came without lawyers or corporate plans. Just a father learning to love from a respectful distance. "They ask about you," Nadia said, joining him with coffee cups. "Not as the man from the airport, but as themselves. George wonders why he thinks like you. Nala notices she has your smile. What do you tell them?" "The truth. That families come in different shapes. That love doesn't always follow straight lines. That sometimes grown-ups need time to learn important lessons." Victor nodded, understanding the gift she offered. Not just access to their children, but the chance to earn his place in their world, on their terms. Over Sunday brunches in Julie's garden, Nadia watched Victor learn to be a father. He traded business calls for story time, designer suits for casual clothes that could handle finger paint and playground adventures. Each week brought small steps toward healing. They shared memories of pregnancy milestones he'd missed, not with blame, but understanding. She showed him photo albums, filling gaps in the twins' timeline. He listened without defending, acknowledging the pain his choices had caused. "I'm not angry anymore," she told him one afternoon, watching him teach George to make paper airplanes. "Anger takes too much energy, and they deserve parents who can share space peacefully." Forgiveness came gradually, built on Victor's consistent presence and genuine change. Not for the man who'd left her, but for the father working to deserve his children's love. Victor learned to navigate his new role with patience. He attended the twins' preschool performances without fanfare, just another parent in the audience. Weekend visits became traditions. Farmers' market mornings, park afternoons, always following the rhythm of children's lives rather than corporate schedules. Julie's initial frostiness thawed as she watched him prioritize the twins' emotional needs over his own desires. She began including him in family dinners, sharing stories of the children's early years without judgment. The twins developed their own relationship with him naturally. George sought him out for quiet reading sessions, while Nala demanded piggyback rides and silly jokes. They accepted his presence without questioning the past, their innocence a gift he strived to honor. "You're different here," Nadia observed one evening as they watched the twins chase fireflies. "More human." "They make me better," he replied simply. 1 year later, Victor sat in a small chair at the twins' 5th birthday party, surrounded by the joyful chaos of children's laughter. No corporate logos, no press coverage. Just balloons, cake, and genuine celebration. He'd found purpose beyond boardrooms. His new educational foundation supported underfunded schools, inspired by Nadia's nonprofit work. The Crane name now stood for community growth rather than corporate power. The twins blew out their candles together, making twin wishes with matching grins. George's artwork covered the walls, while Nala led their friends in an impromptu dance party. They were growing into themselves, untouched by dynasty pressures, free to become whoever they chose. Watching them, Victor finally understood. Legacy wasn't about empires or inheritances. True legacy lived in these moments. In love given freely, in childhood preserved, in the courage to choose what truly matters. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Nadia's consulting firm, now expanded into a historic French Quarter building. In her office, photos told the story of healing. The twins' 5th birthday, family dinners in Julie's garden, weekend adventures with their father. Victor, dressed casually, helped George with a puzzle while Nala practiced her presentation for Bring Your Parents to School Day. Life had found its rhythm, not perfect, but authentic. The children moved easily between their parents' worlds, carrying none of the burden that had once threatened their joy. Crane name still appeared in business headlines, but for different reasons now. Victor's educational foundation transformed underserved communities. Nadia's consulting firm helped nonprofits thrive. Together, they built a legacy of service rather than power. In Julie's garden, where their story of redemption began, the twins grew strong and free. George's gentle soul flourished without corporate pressure. Nala's leadership emerged naturally, uninhibited by societal expectations. True wealth, they discovered, wasn't measured in oil fields or stock prices. It lived in morning hugs and bedtime stories, in the privilege of watching their children grow into themselves. Sometimes life's greatest treasures come disguised as our biggest losses. Victor Crane lost an empire but gained something priceless: the chance to be the father his children deserved. What would you choose between legacy and love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video if you believe true wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in moments of pure joy. Subscribe for more stories that remind us. Sometimes life's detours lead us exactly where we need to be.